Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Integrated Joint Board. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all the public committee reports, including details of specific recommendations, are available on the Council's website. Just before we start, I would like to just offer a token of thanks to Chris Beattie and Julie Bell, who obviously had been serving on the IJB previously. Special thanks from me to Julie, who kind of took me under her wing when I first started and was the chair and vice chair, and obviously served for a number of years, and I wish them both all the best. Okay, item 1, apologies. Liz?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Lois Speed, Leslie Sharkey and Ron McComsky.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest and statements of transparency? Nope. Okay, that moves us on to item 3A, the previous meeting minute, and that's subject for approval as a correct record. Any comments on the minutes? Are we happy to approve? Yeah, happy to approve. Good. Okay, 3B, the action log. This is the action log of the 30th of April. And is everyone happy with the action log, or do we have any questions? No, good, excellent. Chair's assurance report and minute from the Audit Committee of the 30th of April 2025 for noting. Again, any comments, questions? Nope, excellent. This is going to be a cracking meeting today by the looks of it. So 3D, Chair's assurance report, strategic planning group, 14th of May, again for noting. Any questions or queries? Nope, excellent, thank you. And then finally, the Chair's assurance report for the clinical care and professional governance, again for noting. Any questions or queries? Excellent, okay, thank you. That takes us on to item 4, appointments to the Angus Integrated Joint Board. Over to yourself, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you is the appointments to the new appointments to the Angus Integration Joint Board, and that comes for no time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, Angus is a young man who lives at home with his mum, dad and older sibling. Angus has a learning disability and autism, which significantly impacts on his ability to understand and interact with the world around him. His parents are his welfare guardians, and they've given permission to share his recent experiences. Angus requires support with all aspects of personal care and daily living. He's unable to promote his own safety and requires constant supervision, both at home and when accessing his local community. His final school years were challenging, and ways to support the family were becoming more limited. Angus is not able to communicate with others verbally and relies on picture symbols, object reference, his vocalisations and his behaviours to communicate his feelings and wishes. With clear and consistent responses, Angus can enjoy a lot of positive interactions with others. However, he can also become frustrated when he's not able to communicate what he wants, when he doesn't understand what's expected of him, or especially when things change or don't happen when or how he expects them to. He'll show his frustration and his anxiety through his behaviour. This can include Angus banging his head or his elbows on the wall or targeting others with physical aggression. Therefore, there are some limitations to the types of environments and interactions that Angus can cope with. Angus's family haven't found support in the home to be useful, and being supported in the community currently poses a risk to Angus, his family, staff and the public. An adult resource centre was identified as the most appropriate support for Angus when he left school and felt to be essential by his parents in them continuing to support him to remain living at home. It was hoped, via the resource centre, that Angus could build trust and confidence in those supporting him, and which could then progress to him safely accessing his community. The alternative would have been to consider a residential placement, and as there are no available services of this type in the locality, this would have been out of area. And this wouldn't have been in Angus's best interests, as he manages well living at home with his family, and to move a great distance away would have an extremely detrimental impact on both Angus and his family. So Angus began a placement at the Adult Resource Centre in May 2024, and this has been a challenging year for him. There have been ups and downs as we've gotten to know each other. However, with the support of the wider learning disability services, including both psychology and speech and language therapy, Angus's support at the Resource Centre has been tailored to meet his individual needs. The input from Angus's mum has also been invaluable. Angus initially made progress, and some community activities were able to be incorporated into his weekly plan. However, it soon became that Angus was demonstrating increasing behaviours that challenged and that couldn't be predicted. On occasion, this became unmanageable within the resource centre environment. Support was enlisted from the NHS Behavioural Support and Intervention team, that's a BSI team. And that's a small Tayside team led by a consultant clinical psychologist and comprises a learning disability nurse and an occupational therapist. So the BSI team based themselves at the resource centre on a regular basis to work alongside the staff supporting Angus. They observed patterns of behaviour to try and determine causes and provided advice at the time that incidents happened regarding ways to manage situations. Despite the extensive support put in place, the staffing ratio for Angus remained at a 2-to-1. And following an incident that posed a significant risk to others, an urgent multidisciplinary team meeting discussed the most appropriate way forward. And it was agreed that to avoid overwhelming Angus with a 3-day placement full of activities, we would try a reduced service of 1 morning per week for 3 weeks with reviews, and then a gradual increase to be monitored in conjunction with the BSI team. This slow transition back to increased time at the resource centre will also include the completion of ABC charts for both positive and concerning incidents to get a better picture of when a situation has both a positive and a negative outcome. Angus's mum's input is also vital in identifying triggers and including ideas that she may have around managing the incidents better. Modifications have also been made to the environment within the resource centre. Funding was identified, which has allowed underutilised space to be converted into an additional safe and quiet space. A separate entrance was created to help Angus manage transitions into the building, as these were proving very difficult for him. There's a separate area for having lunch and also safe outdoor space. Angus's mum has told us that attending the resource centre does Angus the world of good, and that his face lights up when the bus arrives to collect him. She's happy to see Angus try to interact with his peers in a non-judgmental environment, and that the flexibility of the environment meets his needs better than his school did. The time that Angus spends at the resource centre means that she's got a short break from her caring role and the opportunity to just be herself for some time, with the peace of mind that Angus is in a safe environment. She thanks staff for the respect that is shown of her lived experience in caring for Angus and the vital knowledge she has in how best to support him. The alternative option of an out-of-area residential placement is something Angus's mum considers a last resort. She advises that Angus has never spent any time away from her, except for short stays with his grandparents as a younger child. So, while Angus's story is not one with a clear positive outcome as yet, it highlights the increasing complexities and needs of our young people. It highlights the commitment required from the Learning Disability Service to adapt and to resource services for those people at risk of the breakdown of their support. It highlights the time, the skill mix of staff, the environment and collaboration with families that's required to avoid unnecessary hospital admissions and out-of-area placements, and to keep providing people with care close to home where they can thrive and develop amongst their families and communities. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Excuse me. I do like these sessions because I think it really does bring to life. We get a lot of reports in front of us with a lot of words. And I think when you hear these kind of true life stories, it really kind of brings home some of the key decisions actually that we're faced with having to make. Particularly like the interaction of teams from different areas across the whole system as well. So I thought that was a really fascinating way of approaching quite complex challenges. Happy to open it up if anybody else wants to offer any other comments or make any kind of comments on it. No? Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, item 6, Chief Officer update. Across to yourself, Joe.
Thank you. So this is our regular Chief Officer update, and just a couple of things to draw members' attention to. The first one is in relation to 3.1 of the report, and just to congratulate the teams on our performance around delayed discharges within Angus, but actually to note that across Tayside we are in a very good position in comparison to other health and social care partnerships, and as of last week all 3 partnerships within Tayside were at green status, so a really positive position there. Just to also highlight the publication of the NHS Scotland Operational Improvement Plan, and obviously since the reports were written we've had the publication of the Population Health Framework and the Health and Social Care Service Renewal Framework, and that's actually a really important one, and we will bring something back to the IGB on that because it's one of the first publications that we've had which has been between Scottish Government and COSLA. So really welcome that in terms of the direction of travel for us as an IJB. Members will note in the report that we have put updates in relation to the opportunities, and we have agreed for that report to come back in August this year, and that has been included in the work plan. And the additional inquiries from IGB members, we have put summaries of the questions and the responses in 3.11.1 and 3.11.2, but happy to take any questions. Chair, I am going to ask Alison and Sally just to come in on 3.9.1 in relation to the Chief Medical Officer annual report and Angus's representation in that. Alison, if you wouldn't mind coming in on that.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to talk to this. So the Chief Medical Officer's annual report this year focuses on kind and careful care as part of it, and I was very pleased to see it recognised that Angus is fulfilling that aspect of care. I also would like to highlight pages 9 and 10 of the report where we feature in terms of the work done with Angus Alive. So very much this is the authoritative strategy for how we deliver clinical care in Scotland, and it is very very rewarding to be featured within it as part of Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, but with our wider colleagues within the Prevention Proactive Care Steering Group. Sally wants to say anything else.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, you picked up on something I was going to comment on, just really rewarding to see the recognition in that report for Angus. I think that's a real good news story, and be good to get communication out to staff just to make sure everyone's aware of that. Just before I open it up for questions, just one kind of thing I suppose was wondering in the 3.1, again, a kind of good news story, but I just wondered if we were able to show some kind of historical data that would actually show the kind of improvement path that we've been on as well, so that obviously people that are around that will be aware, but anyone from the public reading it, I think it would be quite good to see the work that's being done. Any questions? No, Jill, do you want to add anything else?
I was going to just bring in at the end, but just since the report was written as well, just two kind of key things just to highlight to members, and I will include in the report for August. We have established a partnership forum where we'll work with Andrew as our service user rep, David from a carer's perspective, Hayley as TSI, and Gemma from a Scottish Care representative as well, just so that we can start working closer together in terms of co-production and co-design, and making sure that we have all of that experience around the reports that are coming. And we have had 2 successful awards. We had the urgent care team for Angus, and members will maybe be aware of or remember the report that came 2023, maybe October 23, where we described our approach to the provision of urgent and unscheduled care, and that team have just won an award last week, and one of the district nurses has also won one of the national awards as well, from a student perspective. So really positive for Angus. So 3 awards this year so far. So we'll aim for more next year.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, again, there's obviously quite a lot of new kind of information that's coming out from various sources, and I'm assuming that they'll kind of feed back into the board once we've had a chance to digest all of that and what it entails. Yeah, excellent. Okay, and item 7, updated annual work plan. Jill, is that yourself again? Sorry, my apologies. Can we agree the recommendation in the report for item 6, the Chief Officer update? Yep.
Thank you. So this is the updated work plan. Members will notice the day opportunities, the month added. The primary care directions, I was going to include it in the report, however we included it in the audit committee report this morning, so that will come through the Chair's assurance report at the next meeting. But other than that, Chair, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay, again, happy to open it up for comments, questions. Happy to approve the recommendations as in the report. Excellent, thank you. And that takes us on to item 8, finance report, and across to yourself, Sandy.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I'll keep this relatively brief, mainly because it's a report that we're sharing in June, but it's about financial year 24-25, so it's a year-end report, but very much in this context, largely looking back the way. The IGB's outturn is set out and summarised at section 4.3, and then later on in the report we just note the reconciliation with the IGB's financial accounts. So this is a management position, but members of the audit committee will see a series of financial accounts going through today's audit committee and audit committees later on in the year. But Chair, I just want to pick up maybe 2 or 3 points, mainly around section 5.10, 11 and 12. In those sections, we're looking more forward, and we are just noting in section 5.10 that we've changed and revised the way we're doing some of our oversight of some of our planned interventions. We're hopeful that that will improve the way we can keep on top of those. 5.11 is important. We know that the IGB asked us to come back with a series of proposals regarding addressing the financial shortfall by £3 million by today's IGB meeting. We haven't quite done that, but we have shared ideas at a development session last week. We're continuing to work on those ideas and other ideas, and we'll bring back a complete update or a more comprehensive update to the August IGB. And then finally, section 5.12 on that page notes some additional reserves that have come into the IGB's accounts following some funding that was allocated through NHS Tayside. But Chair, that is the main points I want to flag up, largely because it's a year-end report, and it's a summary of where we've been, and a lot of the themes are consistent with what we've seen earlier on the year. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sandy. And yeah, it's good to see the financial outturn was better than we'd originally anticipated. I just want to thank yourself and all your staff for all the hard work that goes into monitoring all of these movements during the year. I know it's no easy feast, so I'd just like to go on record to say thank you. Is there any questions? We're all going to be home by 2:30 today at this rate, so. Okay, can we agree the recommendations as per the report? Yep. Thank you. Item 9, budget settlement with NHS Tayside. Back to yourself, Sandy.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just before I start on this item, maybe I could just mention that the Audit Committee this morning did receive a copy of the IGB's draft annual accounts for 24-25. So that, I should have just said that when we were on that last item. That process started, and those annual accounts will be submitted to our auditors before the end of this month. Yeah, so thanks, Chair. Item 9 is about our budget settlement with NHS Tayside. On an annual basis, the partnership seeks to reach a budget settlement agreement with NHS Tayside and Angus Council, and that determines the amount of funding we will have to commission services with. Those agreements are usually reached through discussions regarding the budget proposals, and we had a paper similar to this regarding the Angus Council budget settlement at our last IJB meeting. The position with respect to the NHS Tayside budget settlement, which is what this paper is about, we've set out the detail of where we are at section 5.1 and the position that NHS Tayside have proposed. We have noted that we have some concerns regarding some aspects of the allocation, but we also accept, and you can see this later on in the report, that some of the issues that get brought into this are quite complicated, that there's a number of factors that need to be allowed for. One of the things that we have felt needed to be looked at a wee bit more broadly was the breadth of resource that was being considered in some of the workings behind some of the proposals. So we have suggested that needs to be looked at a bit more with NHS Tayside. And that's why we haven't had a recommendation, a specific recommendation coming forward in this paper at this point. We are still in dialogue with NHS Tayside, and since I wrote this paper, I've had some more feedback from NHS Tayside, and I did say I'd just share some of their further thoughts with us, which I'll just do now. So recognising we have had further dialogue with NHS Tayside, they're keen that when we're considering the proposed budget settlement that they're putting forward, that we, as an IJB, look at the long-term benefits of the overall settlement, including things like the additional funding they're providing for out-of-hours services, which is noted in this paper, and also support that they've provided for mental health in the past and in the coming years. And both those services, the financial support, will help through a period of redesign that will probably go beyond this financial year. And they also wanted to highlight the opportunities that will be available through the NHS Tayside Transformation and Digital Fund, which obviously open to Angus and other parts of the system. And NHS Tayside were just keen that we were making sure that the board was cited on those opportunities, which hopefully they feel will create the conditions for whole system reform across Tayside and ensure financial sustainability, not just for NHS Tayside or Angus, but for the wider system. So they wanted to highlight a few of those things that we can build into our further thinking. In terms of the fact that we haven't made a specific recommendation and that we are suggesting that we continue to have a bit further dialogue with NHS Tayside, there is an element, therefore, of uncertainty in where we might be in terms of some of our planning assumptions. I feel our financial plan can contain that uncertainty right now. Obviously, we need to resolve that in the near future, but we can contain it right now. And hopefully, we might be able to just have a bit more dialogue with NHS Tayside about some of the longer-term aspects of the current budget proposals. So that's, Chair, is what has led us to the types of recommendations you're seeing here about noting the budget settlement that's been proposed for NHS Tayside and seeing if we can just have a bit further dialogue, particularly looking at the recurring element of the budget settlements. So again, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on that or hear any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That was really comprehensive. Just in terms of the transformation fund that you talked about, do you know what size of that, what's the value of that fund is?
Chair, there are different components to that fund, and some members of staff will be aware that some funding has already been kind of made almost accessible to individual members of staff and teams to access to support changes at a an individual department or service level. I think that's about £300,000. I think the overall fund is about £5 million. But there are different tranches of that, I think, and it's perhaps still emerging how that will be allocated across things like broader transformation issues and then digital issues as well. So that's the scale of the funding. It's quite a significant contribution, and as they've highlighted, funds like that will help the overall system to evolve and adapt.
Thanks for that, Sandy. And maybe a bit of an unfair question, but have they outlined a process of how that money can be accessed yet, or is that still being worked?
As far as I'm aware, that's still being worked on. We have, for some elements of this funding, there's been sessions within Angus, I think it's Strathgathro, and maybe at White Hills, even within the last week, where staff have been able to learn about some of the funding that's available. But that's just for some parts of the funding. So it's still very much a kind of an emerging process. So I think we'll learn more about that on a regional basis quite soon, I think.
Thank you. Happy to open up for questions. Alison first.
I'm interested in, as we calculate the budget, they're looking at the NRAC share or proportion according to our demographics. Is this represent and allocating budget according to that? Is this a move to ensure that we're providing similar services across the health and social care partnerships according to our demographics? And if so, would there be room to be handing back services currently provided in Angus to acute services rather than provide them if we're moving to that equity provision? I'm thinking perhaps there's things that we do in Angus that are not done in other health and social care partnerships, and if there's less budget, would there be room to move them back into acute? I'm just wondering, is that part of the conversation around the budget resettlement?
But it's not part of, not that I know, Alison. So it's quite a detailed question. It's one of the things that might come out at some point, but it's not something that's been a factor right now. So the answer right now is no to that. Okay.
Okay, thanks for that, Sandy. And my understanding as well is that the Scottish Government allocation was done on an NRAC basis, and maybe that's what's kind of caused the flow through or something. I'm not sure, but I think, is it George? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Sandy, I just wondered, I read with interest, the to and from the NHS on the budget, the 3% uplift, and then the Perth Ross issue. Where do we go if there's no agreement on the level of budget? Is there an arbitration process, or what happens?
Thanks, George. I'm actually not sure about an arbitration process. I think we've still got a wee bit more room for discussion, George, but you're not really asking about that. You're asking about an endpoint in an arbitration, and I am not 100% sure about that. There's lots of, I have said in the report, it is quite complicated, and one of the things that's a wee bit difficult is taking all those things into account and trying to work out what is a balanced and a fair position. And yes, and we've got to, I feel we have to do that, whether it's doing it ourselves and making sure it feels balanced and fair, or doing it in conjunction with NHS Tayside. But in terms of the arbitration issue, I'm not sure, and that's something I can find out and maybe share in a future update with board members. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the same topic, when's your drop dead date for getting a decision on this? You said that planning will be affected. Is it like by next meeting you'll have a crystallised?
Yeah, so there is an element of uncertainty here, Andrew, that is fair, but I have said at section 7.2, the Angus financial plan has the capacity to cope with this kind of uncertainty at the moment. So we do have that, and the question that we're highlighting in the recommendation is to look at the kind of the recurring element, the long-term element of the funding. So it's not so much about the year we're in right now; it's more about the long-term position. So hopefully that gives you some kind of reassurance. It's not a here and now issue for us. I mean, the discussion has to happen now and here, but the implications are longer term. I feel, and that's what I'm kind of keen to bottom out. But I think we've got the the capacity to deal with an element of short-term uncertainty. Again, in the paper, I feel I've said somewhere, we do, as an IGB, need to remain absolutely focused on our longer-term financial planning position that we've shared at the April and the February IGB meetings.
Yes, Martin.
Thanks for that. It's under 5.3 and you're talking about the community health. You get more funds for community health, but then it goes on to say less funds for acute. So that to me, is that a good news story? Is that because of community health you're using less in acute? Because that's the way it's reading to me, like.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I'm not trying to portray it as a good news story. I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that there may be some parts of the health system where we use fractionally more, but there may be other parts of the health system where we maybe use a wee bit less. And I'm just thinking when we're thinking about the overall budget, we need to think about that broader range of things, because there are, as you kind of I think alluding to, there are things that will perhaps be offsetting there. And that's one of the things that we just feel we need to just look at that a wee bit more to make sure we all have a common understanding of that. But that is one of the things that is quite important in that discussion, the fact that we maybe do a bit more here, and maybe use a wee bit less there. So that is one of the things that we're looking to explore. But I'm not particularly making a judgment about whether that's good or not here. But it is one of the important factors that I think just needs to be explored a wee bit more and a bit better understood. Okay, thanks.
I suppose just in that kind of context then, the overall kind of funding package, if you like, for 25-26 is higher than 24-25, and the focus really is about the 26-27 years going forward. So is there a part here there whereby we can kind of agree the 25-26 with the ongoing discussion around 26-27 and see if we can try and resolve it through that mechanism? I don't know if
that's possible. I don't think we're quite there yet, because the building block to 26-27 is the 25-26 position, in terms of the way things will roll forward. So I think we might get to that point, and I think we can manage the uncertainty on that particular issue, for the next meeting or so, or maybe even the next couple of meetings. But I think we just need to have a bit of time to see if the building blocks that have been built into this year's settlement are the right ones to carry forward. We'll make a judgment about them carrying forward and rolling forward, but we might find that we are able to say, the 25-26 is okay, and then we continue to focus on the underlying position. But at the moment, some of the underlying things are the building blocks for the 25-26 proposal, and it's just getting the balance of that. But we'll obviously have a kind of continuing or seek to have a continuing discussion with NHS, they said, excepting we're coming up to the summer period where sometimes things might be a bit slower moving. So I would think at the next IGB or the one after that, we'll have to be bringing an update back to the IGB about where we are. And we might find that we've reached that kind of position that we run with the 25-26 and see something different about the ongoing position. Okay.
Any other questions? Are we happy to approve the recommendations? Yep, brilliant. Thank you, Sandy. And that takes us on to item 10, the strategic planning update.
Thank you, Chair. So
Jill, sorry.
yes, the paper in front of you sets out the work undertaken for two different areas of work. So one is in relation to the future of our current strategic commissioning plan, and also to share the progress around priority 1 across Angus, prevention and proactive care. I'm going to just begin by presenting the proposal around the current strategic commissioning plan, and then hand over to Sally and probably Dr Clement from a prevention and proactive care perspective to provide an update on prevention and proactive care work. So our current strategic commissioning plan is in place until 2026, and in line with our statutory responsibilities, we have a need to review what we are going to do post that 3-year period, and we have undertaken a piece of work with Strategic Planning Group to engage them on what the next steps for us are in relation to that plan is, and we have brought that back in the paper. I think it's fair to say that whilst our existing priorities remain very relevant and grounded within the needs of the Angus population, we have to ensure that they continue to reflect the evolving national and local landscape. In particular, the recent publications, which I mentioned earlier on as part of the Chief Officer update. But in addition to that, we have had the public sector reform publication published just last week. And that has really signalled a renewed emphasis on and focus actually on joined up working across a number of the different public sectors. And that is about how we design, how we deliver and how we sustain services across communities. And that's not just from a health and social care perspective. So following engagement with the strategic planning group, they have recommended a refresh of the current strategic plan rather than a full rewrite, and that will ensure our strategic commissioning plan remains fit for purpose, aligned not only to the needs and the aspirations of our local people, but also contribute to the core principles of the service renewal framework, which are around improving access to care, focusing on preventative and anticipatory approaches, prioritising quality and equity, and enabling sustainable person-centred services. So this work is not about radically changing our direction of travel, but actually reaffirming and refining our strategic priorities to help us remain current and responsive to any of the future challenges, about reinforcing our commitment to delivering meaningful and measurable outcomes for the people of Angus, but also contributing to the wider population health ambitions across Tayside. I'm happy to take any questions on that part if that would be helpful, or if you want to go on to priority 1 update first.
Yeah, priority 1 and then just take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So I have the privilege of chairing the Prevention and Proactive Care Programme Steering Group, a bit of a mouthful, but this report is intended to provide a reasonable level of assurance regarding the progress to deliver Priority 1, which is prevention and proactive care. And I think the progress made really reflects the passion and commitment from all of the stakeholders. It's a multidisciplinary, multi-agency group. So we're undertaking an ambitious programme of work in Angus as we focus on maximising opportunities for integrated working across the multidisciplinary multi-agency teams, and we want to be promoting independence and well-being approaches. So all of our actions are aimed at promoting healthy ageing and encouraging a greater upstream prevention of disease, with the intention to improve population health and reduce inequalities. So by working collaboratively and creating the right conditions in which people can thrive in their communities, we're really helping people to take control of their lives, and I have some examples of that in a minute, managing their conditions and living with a sense of independence. So as Jill said earlier on, our work is very much aligned to the population health framework, and we've already mentioned the Chief Officer's report for 24-25, but it was a very proud moment for the Prevention and Proactive Care Steering Group to have a spotlight shone on our work at the NHS Scotland conference earlier this month. And the CMO, as a result of his visit for Angus, invited a representative from Angus Alive to present at his launch of the CMO report. So we were really proud of that moment. But not only that, but we were shortlisted to provide a poster presentation about the entire work that we're doing. So I think Angus was well and truly put on the map at that event. So I hope that this report demonstrates that this work is going from strength to strength, and you'll see that in relation to the Be Active Live Well programme, there have been 957 referrals, which is a massive increase on what there has been in previous months when we started to collect data. 40% of these were self-referrals, and in relation to reducing inequalities, 35%, that's 334, were referrals from people living in more deprived areas of Angus. So think it's important to say that it's all very well having 957 referrals, but the completion rate has been very high as well, with 75% take-up of people referred to the Angus Active Start Live Well programme and 83% take-up from those who are triaged into the Stay Well programme. So it's a very, very successful programme. And if I may, I would like to just share some feedback in relation to one individual who said, I went from not leaving the house to signing up for the class and able to get the train by myself, and I'm now wanting to do more classes and have gained more confidence. And that's just what this is all about. So not only talking about the Be Active, Live Well, we're really pleased with the work that's taking place with the Healthy Steps Angus, with 5 more walks taking place across Angus since our last report, and significant progress has been made to reduce falls and with safer mobility, and there's nobody waiting more than 2 days for an initial, or 2 working days for an initial contact with the service. So that's fantastic progress made by that area. So there's a lot in this report, but obviously I won't go through everything, but I'm sure if you don't mind, if I could invite Alison or Dr. Clement to say a few words as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I won't repeat what's been said already. I very much welcome the platform that prevention and proactive care is being given, and the population health framework. I can see that the work that we've been carrying out very much fits. So really to focus on next steps, we're really wanting a focus on the person-centred care framework for NHS Tayside. This work fits with that, and ensuring that we have a quality improvement approach across all our services, place-based care, careful and kind care. So for me, the next step is making sure that this covers all of our services in Angus, that any service plan is not just about coping with current demand, but making sure that we're investing in the prevention and proactive care elements of it. And also working, Chris and I, Schofield here, and I co-chair the integration work stream of the Planned Care Board, and that is helping to link up similar work across Tayside to have a really strategic approach that's focused on evidence-based care. You can see within the report the work, very much hard work around optimising medication with dashboards and our performance indicators at GP practice level. So teams are improving, and that is going to be absolutely key to make sure that we have that ongoing approach at team level to make sure we're all focusing on the right things to do and very much valuing exercise interventions on an even keel with any other interventions, whether it's surgery or whether it's medicines or doing nothing. So we really need to keep going, and certainly there's a commitment, and this is just helping us build the momentum to keep going and roll this out further. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really, a really good report, I think. I think we talk about prevention and intervention quite a lot, and I think you've actually started to bring it to a bit of life and give it a bit of tangible evidence of what that actually looks and feels like. And I think that might be worthwhile looking at as a service user story for a future committee, because I think that would be quite a good, we talk about it all the time, and I think you've just really, well, for me, you've kind of really brought that to life. Do we have any comments, questions? I've got a couple of things. In terms of one of the recommendations to come back in February, I just wondered how that was going to be kind of captured and make sure that we don't lose that. Will that be through the work plan or?
Yes, through the work plan, but we will be giving an overall report on this work. So we do the strategic updates by priority, and then after we've done 1, 2 and 3, we do an overall report. So we won't lose sight of the work that we're doing.
Excellent. And it also talks about working with leisure partners. Does that include, I'm thinking of likes of Montrose, for example, they've got quite a big community programme, and I'm sure the other kind of clubs round about.
So we're working very, very closely with Angus Alive, who are our leisure partner in this area.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Nope. Are we happy to approve the recommendations as in the report? Yeah, excellent, and thank you very much. Okay, that takes us on to item 11, 24-25 Annual Performance Dashboard, and I believe that's back to yourself, Sandy.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just before I go into this report, I'd just like to thank our colleague Paul Feltham, who's been kind of instrumental in bringing this report together, particularly, I mean, he's always involved in our performance information, but also instrumental in bringing together the second appendix, which we'll talk about in a second. This report does two things. It's looking at our performance dashboard information and also introducing that performance management and assurance framework, which we'll go into in a second. In terms of the first part of the report, it summarises what we're planning to do here at section 4.4. We have an annual work plan that has two performance dashboard reports coming to the IGB, one in February a few months ago and one in June, and then separately we'll take our formal annual performance report and publish that by the end of July, and that'll go out under the approval of Jill as our Chief Officer when we get to that point, because it just lies between two IGBs. The sections 5.1, 5.2 and 5.3 clarify what's covered by this performance dashboard. It's largely reflective of the national core suite of indication indicators. There is information here about the national qualitative indicators. These, though, come from a survey that was conducted in 2023-24 and have been published quite some time ago. They were published in May 2024. They've already been subject of discussion at this IGB, as a number of members will probably recall. Therefore, the commentary that we've really put in has been about some of the quantitative indicators, as described at section 5.3 and 5.4. We put quite a bit, well, I was going to say we've put quite a bit of narrative there. Of course, that now means lots of people ask questions because there won't be quite enough narrative there. But there is some narrative there under section 5.4, and hopefully if there's any queries, we'll be able to deal with those as they come through. And as I say, obviously we'll hopefully deal with queries as they come through. It's important, I think, to keep in our minds that sometimes it can be quite difficult to draw a direct relationship between something we do and the way performance eventually outturns in terms of things that are specifically causing certain impacts on our performance report. I've noted that down at 5.5 in the report, but I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. And it comes through in some of the comments that we've made earlier on in the report. The second big feature of this report, though, Chair, is the introduction of a proposed performance management and assurance framework. That's shown at Appendix 5.2. It's been worked on through the executive management team, and as I noted that our colleague Paul has brought this together. It's intended to do a number of things. It's intended to improve our understanding of performance, hopefully drive improvement in that performance, and ensure that we have a better accountability arrangement in terms of our delivery of services and the performance associated with that. It should augment the performance oversight arrangements that we have already, not just at the IGB, but also within our management teams. The performance management side of it is intended to hopefully set priorities, allow us to monitor those, feedback on those priorities and the monitoring that we've done, and then recommend adjustments that we would do to the way we're working. And the assurance side of it is intended to give assurance to the likes of the board, to give confidence that our processes are working and that our risks are being managed. The report is styled to address different audiences at a strategic level, at a kind of a tactical level, and at a service or operational level, and therefore spans the whole of the IGB and the Health and Social Care Partnership. And we've also listed the measures that we're anticipating using, and they are measures that we are already effectively signed up to, national measures and local key performance indicators, as well as things that exist through things like the local government benchmarking framework. That's an introduction to it. We have said in the paper that we expect this to be adjusted or slightly evolve as we adopt it and introduce it. Essentially, we expect there to perhaps be a period of refinement over the next few months as we introduce it. But otherwise, we are hoping that the board are happy to support this direction and give us their endorsement to the performance management framework. Jill might want to comment on how this fits into a broader picture, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions on that myself or the performance information dashboard from earlier on.
Thanks, Andy. And included in the performance management framework, it does distinguish between data for performance management and data for assurance as well. And just to give members the assurance that we are working very closely from a quality perspective as well, and this will link into the wider quality management approach that we are taking, so that we can not only demonstrate our performance management, but actually how good is the quality of care that we are providing to the population of Angus. The assurance side of it and the management, we are going to be establishing quality and performance reviews within the partnership to be able to provide that management element to performance and assurance as well.
Thanks, Jill and Sandy. Again, any comments, questions? Yes, Martin.
Thanks. It's under 5.4 in the third bullet point. The 12% increase in emergency readmissions. And I know they're going to look at it, but that's quite a significant increase. That's 1 in 8 people are being readmitted to hospital emergency readmission. So 80 per thousand. And I mean, obviously they'll be released under consultants thingy, so is there pressure being put on to have these people put out in the community?
Okay, thanks, Martin. I'll kind of comment first. I'm not 100% sure about the statistic. I think there's a 12% increase in the level. I don't think it's 1 in 8 who are being readmitted. I'm not quite sure about the ratio of people that are being readmitted. We have acknowledged, though, that this is quite a complicated statistic, trying to get behind it. And we have tried to, you can see the narrative there. We have been looking at trying to work out other particular factors that might allow us to pinpoint down why we are seeing that increase in readmissions. We have discussed it in some of our management teams. It's worth kind of keeping in mind, and this is more a general comment rather than about the increase, that our occupied bed days generally are relatively low, and that might be a reason why we do tend to see a few more readmissions coming in. But I can't really comment on any kind of behavioural push, in terms of trying to push people out earlier that might be triggering more readmissions. Clinical colleagues might want to comment on that, or Jill might want to come in on that.
Thanks, Andy, and Scott and Alison, and may want to come in. I think, Martin, just in terms of the data complexity around this, so just to give an example, so somebody may be discharged from a medical ward but readmitted with something completely different, and that's still classed as an emergency readmission. So what we're trying to get underneath is that complexity of the data, because not all readmissions are linked to what the original admission or discharge was in relation to. But happy to open it up, and I'm glad that Chris has got his hand up.
If they were being readmitted, is there a significant cost in that readmission? Are they going to go back in longer, etc.? We don't know that.
So it really depends. It really depends on what the readmission or what the admission to hospital is actually for. But Chris has got his hand up, and from a medical specialty perspective, we want to.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation. Although I did note you say it's mirrored in terms of readmission within 7 days. So that is, I think that 7 days is more of a marker of people going home and coming back than the 28-day one. Some of this takes a lot of getting under, as you say, it's complicated. Some of it is planned readmission, so it's about risk management and being able to manage people remotely and coming backwards and forwards to hospital. So it doesn't always mean just because someone comes back, they've been sent home too early. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. So again, you need to look at the detail of those particular cases and see if there is anything identifiable within them that you can find out. Alison may have a different viewpoint.
I think we have to be careful here, because if we're saying that readmission is a bad thing, and then we might stop taking risks, and we have a lot of our frailer elderly population in their own homes. We have a very high proportion of people spending their last 6 months of life at home. These are all good measures, and sometimes that involves as clinicians with families taking the risks of people going home. So I think we need to be careful in, in blanket trying to reduce that figure without looking at the underlying causes. So there may be instances where we don't have good control of diseases. It might be that we have instances where we're relying on a less care package than ideal and that families are not managing. But it might be that we're taking calculated risks to support people in their own home and giving them a shot at being at home rather than going straight to a care home. So we really need to be thinking around individual cases and looking and be careful about saying that readmissions are all a bad thing, because it might indicate that we're taking careful, calculated risks with people.
I think it's a good observation, and I agree with my colleagues, with Dr. Schofield, Dr. Clement. The additional thing that I would add is that being in hospital is also a really risky thing, and so if we can get admissions to be shorter, but we know that occasionally they might need to come back, that's sometimes a trade-off which is reasonable, if that makes sense. So if we say that 90% of people get out at, say, 4 days, but maybe 5% do need to come back in, well, it's better than everybody staying in 5 days. So we do, that is the trade-off, but it is a statistic we're acutely mindful of, because our admissions are in the shorter kind of era, but actually overall it might be of total benefit to the whole population, if that makes sense. But it is one that we are very clinically, you can see there, we're all very acutely focused on that one, absolutely.
Sorry, Andrew, sorry.
Thank you. To be honest, I was just about to put my hand down, because between the 3 other clinicians here, I think you've pretty much said everything. I think it's just beware of a statistic is my message, because actually, as we move care close to home, actually, this statistic may actually go up, and actually that may be a positive thing, because actually that may be delivering more or short bursts of hospital stay to provide a specific intervention, and then back home again, and it's a really blunt tool. So yeah, support everything my colleagues have said.
I think just to add to that, Andrew, I absolutely agree, and I think that is one of the important elements of taking a quality improvement approach to that, so that you've got that as a potential balancing measure. It's not necessarily an outcome measure of the kind of care that individuals are receiving. So that is one of the other important elements of a quality improvement approach, so that we do maintain balancing measures across what we're monitoring.
Thanks for that. Any other comments or questions? Are we happy to approve the recommendations? Yep, agreed. Excellent, thank you. So item 12, protecting people, Angus Strategic Committee, Adult Support and Protection.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to bring an assurance update report to the IGB on the work of Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee. I'll refer to that as PPASC, in relation to the work that's been undertaken around adult support and protection. I do make reference within the report to the transition from the previous Adult Protection Committee to the current PPASC arrangements. And you'll note as well that I've shared the strategic plan for 2024 to 2028 in Appendix 1 of the report. And that really covers the work of the delivery groups that all contribute to driving best practice within adult support and protection in Angus, alongside child protection and violence against women and girls. I'll just pick out a couple of things that I think are noteworthy. So you'll note within section 4 of the report, the table there, which contains the referral routes and the numbers in. And I think it's important to highlight that we do have a continued broad section of referral routes into adult support and protection. And actually that's a real strength in Angus. And it does highlight that it's everyone's job to see and report adult protection concerns. I've also made note there that whilst the number in the table is lower than last year, there's likely to be an underreporting in respect of care homes, and that is due to the creation of a new care home support team. So I would expect that number to increase next year in terms of having a full data return. I've also highlighted within section 5 some of the current adult protection activity. I'll draw attention to the work that we're currently undertaken with the Care Inspectorate around supported self-evaluation, which has been very positive to date. And it's something new and innovative and different for us, where we're considering actually what early intervention and prevention activities are we undertaking within adult support and protection. So that's a new way, it's a new paradigm to understand adult protection, and it links into other areas of work that have been touched on already in terms of our early intervention and prevention work across the partnership as a whole. The report does highlight that we do have robust monitoring and reporting arrangements in place, and the report really seeks to provide you assurance around the quality of our adult support and protection arrangements in Angus, which contribute to a sustained low level of risk overall. So you'll note there's proposals and the recommendations within the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions? George.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise if I've missed it somewhere in the report, or if this report isn't really what I'm expecting from it. I mean, I'll give you an example. On the table, the police made 418 referrals, but there's no mention. I mean, the 418 could have meant 2 case conferences or whatever the next stage is, you know, to actually take it forward. So 400 and odd of them, while important, could have been just, you know, a report. But it doesn't say that. Should it say that, or should I be looking for that somewhere else?
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. So the vast majority of our referrals always come in via the police. That's the most common route. What we could do in the next reporting period, which might help, would be that we have an early screening group set up within Angus, and that is what we're looking at through the work with the Care Inspectorate. So the early screening group highlights adult protection referrals predominantly from the police through into our services. They're discussed at the early screening group, and then next stages are planned from there. So that might give more of a breakdown if that's helpful. We always expect to see high referrals from the police, and I think when you look back over the years, there's been peaks and troughs in terms of numbers. Some of that's around understanding of threshold. We have we're fortunate that we've got very good relationships with our colleagues in Police Scotland. We work very closely with them, so that enables us to ensure that we have the same threshold understanding and activities. So we would hope to see, whilst numbers may incrementally increase, we wouldn't want to see too many spikes across the board, but actually breaking down the early screening group is something that I'm happy to do for future reporting, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions, queries? Nope. Happy to approve the recommendations. Yep, excellent, thank you. Okay, that takes us on to item 13, Tayside Mental Health and Learning Disability Programme Update. Are you introducing that stuff, Joe? Not Munis.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased today to present an update on the Tayside Mental Health and Learning Disability Programme. Members will see in the report that progress is being made across the wider system, with the vision that Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Whole System Change Programme is a whole system model of care and an energised culture focusing on transformation and whole system collaborative working. The board has met 3 times since the last update, and the report outlines what has been discussed, with the recognition that 2 key areas were identified as requiring a refocus. These are learning disability coming home ambitions, which are noted to be in progress and behind schedule and requiring a refresh, and delivering on the financial framework. As noted in the paper, to address this challenge, it's been agreed to jointly support, and that's across the 3 partnerships, a temporary 23-month fixed-term lead officer post to provide whole system leadership for the learning disability redesign, with a priority focus on leading the return to the community and care planning for all complex learning disability inpatients, with a view to eliminating delay and meeting the ambitions of the Coming Home report, and the establishment of a crisis response team for Tayside to maintain people with complex needs within their own families, at home and their communities, preventing breakdown and supporting transitions from inpatient care to community placements. It's also important to note that the draft model of care is at its final stages and has the intended aims of prioritising health promotion, prevention and early intervention, building effective, inclusive and streamlined services across all communities, aiming for excellence in inpatient services and helping people live with and recover from mental health conditions with care and compassion, placing living and lived experience at its heart and in making the big difference for people who experience mental ill health. And you will see these are positive developments, and I hope members are encouraged to see matters progressing. I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any comments, questions? I think just my only kind of question was just around the kind of change or the shift in the staffing model, and just kind of, I suppose, kind of a bit of the thought about how big an impact that'll make, and how we'll be able to kind of measure that impact. If that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. I think it's a work in progress. So I think the idea has been that we'll try a coordinated approach across Tayside. One of the drivers is obviously the significant delays for people with learning disabilities in hospital. So I think measuring success will be to be able to identify resources for people with complex needs to live safely in the community. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. If there's no other questions, are we happy to approve the recommendations as per the report? Excellent, thank you. And that takes us on to the Health and Care Staffing Scotland Act 2019 Statutory Annual Report. Is that yourself again? Yes.
Yeah, again, so thank you. So today again, I'm pleased to bring another report. This is the Health and Care Staffing Scotland Act 2019, and it's a statutory annual report. This is the first time that such a report has been brought, as we now have a requirement for the Angus IGB to produce and publish an annual report under Section 3 of the Health and Care Staffing Act. Today we are looking to approve the proposal that the IGB and Angus Council produce and publish a joint annual report covering all aspects of planning or securing the provision of social care services from a third party, as outlined by the Scottish Government. So today I'm looking to approve the annual report that relates to this function, and to note the planned approach to the publication of the report following this approval. Just for assurance, members will be aware, or may be aware, that further information will come in our workforce annual update in October, which we do discuss safer staffing in general across health and social care. Just to add in the interim that there are governance routes for our health services, and presently these are reported through the Health and Care Staffing Board, which is chaired by NHS Tayside, and that reports to this Staff Governance Committee of NHS Tayside. So you will see that hopefully if this response is approved today, this will be shared with Angus Council, who will submit the combined response to the Scottish Government. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I suppose I just had one quick question, which was just around the recommendation, which is the sorry, just to find it. The IJB and the Angus Council produce and publish a joint annual report. Will we still be able to distinguish aspects of the IJB and Angus Council, or will it all be kind of merged into one?
Well, the bits that will be relevant to both, so they will merge, and the bits that will be separated.
Thank you. Happy to approve the recommendations per the report. Excellent, thank you. Okay, that takes us on to the minor injury and illness service review. And is that across to yourself, Jill?
Thank you, Chair. And I know that Lisa and Dr Jameson are also going to contribute to this. I just wanted to say a few words before I do hand over to them. I'm really pleased to be bringing this report to IGB today, which sets out the proposed model for the future delivery of minor injury and illness services across Angus. Members will hopefully remember back in February the approval of the strategic vision for minor injury and illness services. This work has really been guided by core principles around co-production of the model of care with communities and stakeholders, including equity of access for residents across Angus, but a real key commitment to delivering care closer to home, which is also in line with our strategic commissioning plan. It represents what I would say is a considered move towards a more person-centred, integrated and flexible model of urgent care provision, one which thoughtfully addresses people's clinical pathways and, importantly, places. And we all know that individuals like to receive care as close to home as possible. And it's really important to say that in this context, places it extends beyond what we would traditionally class as buildings, and it's really about how we include a broader network of community-based access points for the provision of care. The review has also been informed by wider strategic drivers, including the GP contract commitments, the implementation of care and treatment services, known as CTACs, and I will bring Dr Jameson in around that. But also the pressing need to support GP sustainability across Angus. And members will hopefully again remember the report from April where we did discuss GP sustainability. I think it's important just to acknowledge that this work is different to the out-of-hours reform, so this is not in relation to the provision of GP out-of-hours services, but there is a strong alignment between the two services, and we will work seamlessly to ensure that that is included in the work that we do around out-of-hours. I want to provide assurance that minor injury provision at White Hills will continue as is. There is no proposed change to how we deliver minor injury services within White Hills. And it's not about withdrawing services, it's actually about strengthening access and making better use of our skilled workforce and improving efficiency, ensuring safe and timely sustainable care for the future. So finally, I would also like to just acknowledge the level of engagement that has underpinned this work, which has included close collaboration with Health Improvement Scotland, and their feedback on our engagement approach has been both constructive and affirming, and we're really grateful for their recognition of the commitment to inclusive and transparent design of these services. I would just like to ask Dr Jameson just to describe what a care and treatment service actually is, and then we'll ask Lisa just to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yeah, it's really important to understand this concept because it's something that people might not be familiar with and hopefully help set the context of what we're doing. Community Treatment and Care Centres, or CTACs, are local nurse-led facilities that deliver a range of planned and routine care that traditionally we would have provided within general practices. The CTACs were actually developed as a direct result of the new GP contract and are actually a legal requirement since about 2022. They came into effect to be legally required of us. The core services of CTACs typically include, but are not limited to, things like phlebotomy, getting your bloods taken, basic disease data collection, biometrics like your blood pressures, or chronic disease monitoring, and can include minor injuries and dressings, suture removals, ear syringing, and even minor surgery procedures if that is locally required. CTACs are there to reduce pressures on GP practices whilst maintaining good patient local access. Across Angus, there are a couple of different models. For example, in the Links, it's all within one centre in the Links, in Arbroath similarly, but elsewhere in Angus, they're delivered within the GP practices themselves. In many cases, the patients will notice little difference to the care that they receive. The staff, however, will be employed by the Health and Social Care Partnership rather than the individual GP practice. And I hope that clarifies exactly what a CTAC is and really helps set out from here what we'll go on to describe.
Okay, thanks. This paper is an update to the paper presented to the IJB in February, which set out a strategic direction for urgent and unscheduled care in Angus and sought the approval for a review of minor injury services within Angus. This paper clearly sets out the work that has taken place since February, and in particular the extensive stakeholder engagement and work with local communities to set out a proposal for the future delivery of minor injuries care. Most significantly, I want to emphasise that we have approached this with a quality improvement approach to change, and most importantly, we have engaged and listened to what the people of Angus told us was important to them. Local people have had a voice both in the proposals and the ideas put forward, and also on the identified preferred option that was identified. Sorry. Whilst this work has not been deemed a major service change by the standards laid out by Health Improvement Scotland, we have worked extensively with them and have strictly followed the involving people guidance. And I'm very pleased to say that HES have recognised this and issued their assurance to us around the process followed. We did this because we were genuinely open to exploring and working with our local communities to find out what matters to them. We had one aim for the project, and that was to ensure that we provided the best service possible within available resource. You can see from the number of responses detailed in the paper how important this issue is to local people. We also ensured that we have worked in partnership with our staff and staff side, and the willingness of the staff from both the CTAC and MIU services have really contributed to the paper that comes forward today. Our partners, such as professional stakeholders, have also had a significant contribution, in particular our colleagues in ED, Scottish Ambulance Service, NHS 24, out of hours, acute, as well as general practice. Following the clinically led option appraisal, the preferred model identified was to deliver minor injury services as part of the community care and treatment service, which Scott's just explained for you there, with our both minor injury and illness unit developed to manage more complex presentations. This model will localise minor injury provision, with more people being able to be treated closer to home, ensuring that minor injury care that can be delivered locally is done so wherever possible. If approved, the next phases of the project will be to see the implementation and to operationalise this. The important thing is to emphasise that CTAC is in all areas across Angus, meaning that some minor injuries will be offered everywhere, with only the complex cases and such as those requiring X-ray being delivered in Arbroath. Whilst the operational detail of this is still to be worked through, I can provide the assurance that we will continue to work in the same way that we have approached this work to date, in a spirit of openness, engagement and with transparency. Our goal throughout this has been to ensure that minor injury services remain effective, responsible and sustainable, and continue to meet the needs of our communities now and in the future. Everyone who has been involved in this work has been committed to delivering this aim. As well as the extensive stakeholder engagement, we have included in the appendices there a detailed EQIA, which addresses a number of issues such as transport accessibility, etc., issues that we know from our engagement are very important to people. Before I close, I would just like to acknowledge, if I may, some of the work that has gone on in some key people, and in particular Scott, who has helped lead this work, and the nursing team. They can't be with us here today, but I would like to draw attention to our senior nurses and the senior charge nurses of both services and their teams, along with Sally and Victoria, who do join me at the back there. And we're happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how many people were able to attend the session. I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, which I thought was really, really useful from somebody like myself. It gave me a much greater understanding of some of the challenges and some of the benefits. And I have to say, I think it's a really thorough options appraisal. And I was really impressed by the level of engagement, not just with the end users, but also with staff as well, because I think that's really critical that we take them on the journey with us. So happy to open it up for any questions. Yes.
Thank you. Wider stakeholder engagement identified accessibility as a key priority for 80% of respondents when accessing minor injury and illness services. Given this, how will the new model address concerns from residents in areas like Currymuir who may find Arbroath less accessible than Mine Wells, particularly when X-ray imaging is required? There's a risk that people may bypass local pathways and present directly to A&E, potentially increasing pressure on that service.
So, okay, fine. Answer that, Chair. A very important question is I'll declare my interest, I suppose, in the answer as a GP who works in Kirriemuir. But yeah, it's. I think this model really, actually the people of Kirriemuir are already seen for minor injuries within the practice initially. And yes, if they need an X-ray, they do have to go to down to Arbroath. It's not common. I would say it's about 2 people a week that go down to Arbroath from Kirriemuir, and helpfully when somebody has got an injury, people who choose to live in a very remote location tend to be able to understand that they need to go somewhere and they don't need an ambulance, but they feel that they need to go down. And to date, in over a decade of working there, it's been something that's just has not been a massive obstacle. But helpfully in this model, as we've just outlined and as Lisa has helpfully described, if you were, say, for example, in Brechin or in one of the other towns, actually now, if it's not needing an X-ray, our aim is to actually deliver that care within the town itself. So actually, in the majority of cases, what we're hoping is actually we deliver more care closer to the patient in their own town, actually reducing from our current status quo the transport needs, because we're able to deliver those things closer to the patient. What that exactly looks like in each town will be different, and it might involve district nursing, it might involve practices, it might involve, as we think, mostly the CTAC staff, but we'll work with the practices on the best model for them to deliver that as close to the patient as we can. So I think, in fact, it's the opposite, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight that. It's really important.
Yes, Martin.
I thank you for this paper. I think it's an excellent paper, and I'm particularly grateful for the amount of stakeholder engagement. I would be fully supportive of this great paper. Thanks.
Sam.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for the paper. I think 12.3 sums it up. The fact the need for ongoing engagement is to tell people what the service can do, and differentiate it from an emergency department, because, and as you say, it's going to be different for each area. So I think the communication strategy would be important, but obviously you'll have that in hand. Eh?
Yeah, we're very mindful of that, Chair. As I also mentioned, I'm sure somewhere in the paper, that the average person doesn't contact or need minor injuries that often. If you think of yourself, you might only need it on average about once a decade. Some people it's more often because they're more accident prone with their chosen activities. But what we do have is really, really good access points where if you do happen to go to a community pharmacy, you pitch up at the reception desk at your practice, you phone NHS 24, it doesn't matter. We've got really well-trained staff in all those centres to seamlessly move you to the right place very quickly, because we know when these things happen, you don't immediately know where am I meant to go. And we do know that in 10 years when that comes up, the things might have changed. So it's okay. Our staff are all well-trained to seamlessly move you right to the correct place as quickly as we can, because we're mindful of how unsettling it can be when you have an injury and you don't know where to go. So absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So Louise makes a very important point around how we ensure equity of access for our patients, and I know that in Scott you're funded to provide minor injury services in Kirrie. I know that I'm not funded down in Monteith. I'm a Monteith GP, just to declare my interest. I'm quite interested in the timescales for rollout of the engagement with the GP practices, not currently in receipt of minor injury services support, and also some information around that. I'm also interested in highlighting the effect on GP sustainability, because while I quite enjoyed at 5:30 seeing the minor injuries patient I saw last night, late on, because I wouldn't put them to an MIU or send them around the country for something I can do, it's affecting the sustainability of GP practices that are not currently having that equitable access to support to look after their population, and that has a knock-on effect on the population itself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Clement, for the question. It's hard for me to commit my staff to a timeline publicly, but what I would say is reflect on what we did in Montrose, where we reinstigated it there from scratch. It was probably about 3 months from start to finish to get that up and off the ground. So it's quite a short time scale. It does involve training of the staff, and we have to make sure that the referral pathways are seamless, but it was quite quick, and I'm acutely mindful of the sustainability challenges across general practices, including within Monteith, and be assured, Alison, you know how committed we are to making sure that we get that equitable access as timely as we can, mindful that we've got to do that across all the other areas. It will be a priority, and I'm sure that an operational detail will follow thereafter, and I'll contact with you directly to outline that.
Yep, I've got Andrew first. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and for the very robust engagement that's gone into this. So very much support that, and just as the Chair highlighted, that should be commended. I've got a mixture of sort of positives and sort of cautionary notes in what I'm about to say. So positives, absolutely. I think enabling CTACs to deliver what they are contractually required to deliver, which is minor injuries, within the GMS 2018 contract, has to be welcomed, because CTACs have to be provided in or as close to practices, so therefore are going to be accessible to the population as close to home as possible. So that is absolutely to be welcomed. I think there is, for those of us who've been here far too long and been providing services, there is some change over the last decade or so, in terms of previously having more centres within Angus that were generally providing minor injuries and illness, and that's where, just within this paper, I urge some caution, because we seem to be using minor injuries units and minor injury and illness interchangeably. Including in the direction that talks about functions covered by direction, minor injury and illness services, and yet most of this direction is actually talking about installing minor injury services within CTACs, not illness services. I think that's really important, because actually there used to be minor illness service provision within these, and certainly Arbroath does provide that as part of the out-of-hours service, but not as part of the in-hours service. So I think it's just important to get the terminology right, especially if we're writing a direction. And also the direction, I could argue, is actually, should it even be necessary, given the fact that NHS Tayside is already legally obliged to provide MIU services in all of its CTACs across the entirety of the NHS Tayside estate. But it can't help to tell them twice through different directions. So I guess that's my concern. The other is just there's no detail in here about two things. One is hours of operation. We're already aware that CTACs provide limited hours of operation in comparison with core hours for GMS contracts, and I would ask that that's reviewed in time. The other is the direction within the GMS 2018 contract. It highlighted that services should not be reduced or withdrawn following the introduction of this contract. So I would ask for detail of the breakdown of the funding for the MIU element of this, and how funding from the existing MIUs will be transferred to supplement CTAC funding, and that detail of the routes for the funding is not within this paper. I don't think it necessarily needs to come to this board, but I think it would be welcome to be included for completeness. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And in relation to the implementation, obviously, as Lisa and Dr. Jameson said, we'll work up an implementation plan, but in relation to that, the governance element, in relation to the contractual requirements, that will come through the general practice governance routes, which you sit on, so we will see it through that route.
Thank you. Kirsty.
Thanks, Chair. It's an ask as opposed to a question. So in terms of the children's rights assessment, I think it's really helpfully set out and clearly identifies the issues. But I see in there that should this be approved, that there'll be ongoing work in terms of assessing the impact on children, so gathering feedback, looking at the impact on families. And I wonder about that information being reported more directly into Angus Integrated Children's Services Partnership,
because I think it ties into whole family support when we're considering the impact of poverty on families, single parent families, families with multiple children, and how their needs might cause particular issues for them seeking appropriate health care. So I think it's an opportunity for us to bring that information more directly into a Children's Services Forum in Angus, where we could look at what else could we do to support that. So it's an ask as we move through, I think, Jill, around who brings that in and how we best deliver that. In the new Children's Services Plan that will be devised for Angus from 2026 onwards, I think it should feature. Thanks.
Andrew, you want to come back in?
Sorry, my apologies for coming back in. There was just one thing I forgot to mention. Jill, or the Chief Officer, introduced, as we introduced this subject, that Whitehills would not be stopping or losing a minor illness service. I'd just like some expansion on that, because I'm not sure the direction or the preferred model actually states that. It states enhancing our growth, and it's mute on the Whitehills element, and I know that that's been causing some concern. Certainly, I know my social media has been spammed with information in this regard. So perhaps some more detail on that would be helpful, just for the board.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that, Chair. The number of so our Whitehills Minor Injury Unit previously did in the main planned care, catheter care, wound care, things like that. That's, as I've outlined with the CTAC services, been moved to CTAC. So it's actually done in the same place. It's just done by different people. And so what we've found is that the specialist minor injury nurse who was there, who was doing catheters and wound care, is then just doing minor injuries. But for a population of Forfar, the number of minor injuries per day, it struggles to justify somebody solely having that as their job. So why would we have the nurses doing wound care and catheters and the other minor CTAC work, whilst the minor injury nurses not? So we're effectively, from a Whitehills perspective, if you have a minor injury and you phone up Dr. Thompson's practice and say, I twisted my ankle this morning, and say, good news, was it injured and fractured? They said, no, it's just a cut actually, I've got over it. You can go to Whitehills, and you'll be going to the same place, and in fact possibly seeing even the same sort of nurses, but it might not have Whitehills Minor Injury Unit as the name. It might be called Whitehills Community Treatment Centre under the name, but you're going to the same place, seeing the same people potentially, and able to access that just as easily. So it is our intention, as we've said throughout, to not degrade that, and as you rightly point out, Dr. Thompson, we're obliged not to degrade services, unless of course there's a reasonable clinical reason for that. But the same happened for Montrose. So Montrose, again, the numbers don't justify it, but we want to deliver minor injury care in Montrose. Therefore, we merge it up with the CTAC service. We still deliver the minor injury care, but these nurses are also doing, make sure that we're making good use of resources. They're doing wound care, they're doing catheters and other services there. So it's about making good use of resources throughout our system, and making sure we make best use of public money in that regard. So hence hence the subtle shift, if that makes sense. But exactly as you say, Dr. Thompson, we're obliged legally within the CTAC to deliver that minor injury care, and so we're following that legal direction as best we can.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, George.
Thank you, Chair. If there aren't any further questions, I would like to request a short recess to discuss what we've heard.
Yep. If we got any other questions before? Nope. I think we'll just stop for a 10-minute recess, comfort break, etc.
Hi, John. Can we pause the live stream, please? please.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, that's us back live. Okay, so we're on the minor injury and illness service review, item 15. Again, are we happy to move the recommendations as per the report? Yes, George.
Yes, I would like to propose an amendment. The amendment being that we defer a decision on this item till a future IGB. The reason being is that this is a difficult one. We believe that we have additional questions, or will have additional questions. However, given our knowledge of the subject, we're not sure what they are yet. Does that make sense? I have a seconder.
Yep. Who's the seconder? Look, Louise. I mean, again, there was a session a couple of weeks ago, and obviously, as I say, it was all new to me, so I'd be happy to move the recommendations, and that'd be my motion. And if I have a seconder, Sam.
So we'll now move to a vote. The vote, seconded by Sam Riddle, is that we move the recommendations as detailed within the report. And the amendment by Councillor George Meakin, seconded by Councillor Louise Nicholl, is that we defer the report to a future IJB to allow further,
Yeah, to allow further discussion on.
To allow further discussion to commence. Can you please vote whether you want to vote motion or amendment? Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Louise Nicholl.
Amendment.
Martin Black. Sam Riddle.
Motion.
Councillor Meakin.
Amendment.
Motion has won 3 votes to 2 and has been carried.
George.
Would it be possible to have our dissent recorded, please?
Yeah, I'll note your dissent.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, Andrew.
Chair, I wonder whether I can ask, I did raise it in my comments there, whether the word illness can be removed from the direction to NHS Tayside, because that is an incorrect direction to include the word illness.
Yep, happy to do that. Okay, so the next item is the date of the next meeting. So the next meeting of the Angus Integration Joint Board will be held on Wednesday, the 27th of August 2025 at 2 p.m. Item 17, exclusion of public and press. The Angus Integration Joint Board voting members are asked to consider in terms of the Board's Standing Order 11.2 whether the public and press should be excluded during consideration of item 18 so as to avoid the disclosure of information which is exempt in terms of Part 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do we agree? Yep. Item 18 is the last item on the agenda, which will be heard in private. This will draw close to this meeting and we will not return to the live stream on the close of business.
Hi, John. Can we stop the live stream, please?